Thank you everyone for attending. Hello, welcome to our webinar, Executive Assignment, What You Need to Know, Top Tips for CEA Success. A career executive assignment position can be extremely fulfilling opportunity in state government. And as these leadership positions shape important policy decisions for Californians. But how does a person become really successful at their CEA position? And how do other CEAs define success? And can you incorporate these into your current position? Here to discuss this topic is a distinguished former state executive, John Hyber. John has a deep experience with government policy, finance, information technology, and administration, and has over 16 years of leadership and executive experience within state government before he retired in 2018. John has worked in a number of control agencies, including the Department of Finance, the State Controller's Office, CalPERS, and covered California. He last served as the Chief Deputy Director of Housing and Community Development Department. Please join me in welcoming John Hyber. John, take it away.
You bet. Thank you very much, Jason. So I wanted to say good morning to everyone and move forward to some priorities and the landscape that we would want to look at right now as a career executive assignment incumbent. And I wanted to make sure that everyone on the call knows that for a career executive assignment, we have some local government individuals. So that is really an executive level position. And they're typically responsible for a program or for a broad function area within a department at the state level. So it's an executive position, it's a leadership position, and you're responsible for a broad responsibility, a broad area. And so fulfilling your responsibilities with a CEA position, one of the first things we want to be aware of is the current landscape. You know, where's the focus right now? And so right now, some of our concerns are listed here. We have some fiscal concerns. There's concerns with general fund revenue that we could be migrating into a recession if the state needs to incur debt more, or the federal government for that matter, debt, what we anticipate in regards to economic changes and federal support, both for the state and for local governments and for schools for that matter. And this is all, the catalyst for all this year is COVID-19. And so COVID-19 is going to result in a significant change in the landscape. Already we saw that with the governor's budget that was presented on January 10th, his annual budget proposal, we saw in the spring that there were significant changes, there were significant reductions to that budget proposal. And so that has already induced many changes in the landscape. And ongoing issues that we're wrestling with include housing, global warming, fires, drought, education issues, pension issues, and funding of local government. And to align with those policy proposals, we need to recognize that the administration works with the legislature to come up with our annual spending plan. And so the priorities of both of these entities, the administration and the legislature, don't necessarily line up perfectly every year. And this year was a good example. After the governor came out with the May revision in May, there were some disconnects between what the administration was looking for and what the legislature was looking for. And local governments were actively involved in that discussion as well. And so we do have a budget now. So a budget was passed by the legislature and then signed by the governor just a little bit more than a week ago. And so now we're beginning the fiscal year with a new budget, which is certainly a good thing. So for 2020, we really need to anticipate that there are going to be more changes. As we look off into the horizon, it creates a need to be nimble. We'll have to maintain the ability to shift gears and to adjust our expectations. So before I move to the next slide, I wanted to mention, right now, things seem unpredictable. We don't know what the future holds. But there have been times in the last decade where we've seen similar instances, and it doesn't take very much effort to go back in our memories and remember in 2008 and 2009 with the Great Recession and some of the things we had to deal with there. And I'll only focus on one issue at that time. Was I was with the State Controller's Office, and the State Controller's Office manages all the payment function for all dollars leaving the state treasurer. So to pay vendors, to pay employees, and to pay other obligations. And so what we were facing in 2009 is there simply wasn't enough cash to pay the state's obligations. And so the state had to issue what we call registered warrants, or IOUs. And this was a very drastic time for state government. And to issue IOUs is an indication of financial weakness. And this lasted for several years, and we've since then bounced back, but now we're looking at uncertainty of a different nature. But the reason why I mention that is, as tough as things seemed in 2008, 2009, and again in 2010, we did bounce back. And so it's important to be optimistic and know that we are going to get through the challenges that we're looking at now. So as an executive, you really want to keep your periscope up and look at what's happening and identify the sorts of things that'll be a catalyst for change. So here we see some resources. The Department of Finance is listed here. So the Department of Finance really does an excellent job of laying out resources for state executives and for local governments as well, for providing information. So you can find information related to the governor's budget that's released on January 10th, the resulting changes to the budget, May revision, and also once the budget is approved, right now, how to administer the budget. So it's very helpful for state executives to access the resources that are here to not only see them, but to learn what's available and learn how they can be used. It's very helpful. In the next section, we have resources in the governor's office. So you can go to the governor's office website, identify various individuals, and when they're assigned to what we call exempt appointments, so they're appointed by the governor. Recently, the governor has also issued many executive orders related to COVID-19. All of those are listed on the governor's website there, and press releases. So if you're looking for information about changes, it's a great place to look for information, and the information will be there in the press release and in the executive orders themselves that you can access on the website. And then thirdly, one resource that was shared with me probably almost, it had to be about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, is rtumble.com. And I strongly urge you to take a look at that, because that will list out by topic area, by subject, significant policy news for California. So that can deal with the economy, with jobs, with pension, with education, homelessness, housing. It also has a section there that deals with issues that are related to the Beltway, what's going on in Washington, D.C. and POTUS. And POTUS, for those of you, most everyone will know, that means the President of the United States. So I'll go ahead and move to the next slide. So some suggestions on dealing with your situation in a leadership position. And what we have here is, as a leader, you really want to set an example. You want to be predictable. You don't want to be volatile. You don't want to walk into a meeting and your behavior is unexpected. You want people to, it's like a family arrangement, if you will. You want people to feel secure in getting their work done and knowing what they need to do. So you want to set clear expectations and treat people with respect. Prioritize your work, and an important one that many leaders, people migrating to leadership, miss out on, and that is the need to delegate, because there's no way you can get it all done yourself. So you will need to delegate. And don't be a black hole. Respond to your email, respond to questions. If you need additional time to respond, go ahead and share that with the person requesting your attention. But people will begin to exclude you if they send you information and they don't get a response. And something else some new executives don't pick up on very quickly is, which emails do you address first? Well, when you're coming from a program, you're leaning towards your program. There's a tendency to focus on what you know best, but really the emails you should address first would be from your boss. When I was a chief deputy, I always responded to the emails from my director first, or my director would respond to those questions from agency, and occasionally I would get questions from agency. So every day when I look at my email, I'm always looking at who gets the responses first, who gets the responses second, and those that I could defer perhaps later in the day, or perhaps they didn't even need a response. So I'm always looking at that. The other thing I wanted to share with you is the development of meaningful metrics. You really need to ask the hard questions and get your program to stretch. You want to establish a cadence of reports that could be weekly or monthly. I encourage you to consider more frequent reports and review the data in the reports. Does it really hit the hot spots? Does it identify the information that you need to be reviewing? Does it identify risk areas? And remember, measurement equals accountability. If people know that you're looking at something, then they're going to act accordingly. I want to share a story with you. I worked at one department early in my career, and I was in a leadership position. And when I started, I would receive these reports from all the divisions that reported to me. And I would get these weekly reports that identified very helpful metrics. They helped me to understand that the work was getting done, that we were on track, or sometimes when we were building up a backlog in a particular area, I could see that developing. Further, it helped me understand the programs themselves. So the metrics reports not only were like a barometer of how things were going, they also helped me understand how the program operated. So it was very helpful. Now contrast that with another department I worked with. I started in a leadership position, and I started in this department, and I didn't ask for the reports. I waited to see if I would receive them. And I was disappointed because I was not receiving any reports. I waited a week, I waited 2 weeks, a month, and finally, after 5 weeks, I brought the executives together, and we had a discussion about the need to submit reports that provided metrics on how we were beginning or how we were achieving our goals, how we were addressing our mandates. So there are various requirements for us to meet, and we needed to make sure that we were addressing those. So that gets back to the issue of measurement and accountability. So if somebody knows you're looking at something, they will be more accountable. So this goes along with creating a culture at the department. So one department had a very promoted synergies, promoted teamwork. There was really a strong work ethic, whereas this other department, we needed to point the compass in a different direction because we wanted to develop the culture of team, of helping, of sharing. And so what we had to do was begin the process. We started from scratch of preparing metrics reports. So the last point here is to proceed incrementally, be realistic when seeking changes. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Do it in achievable sections, and use something like ADKAR, which is a change management model, which the ADKAR acronym stands for. First, you want to establish awareness, and then create the desire for the change, and then make sure everybody has the knowledge, what they need to know for the change, and the ability, and then reinforce. And so that's a model that one can use to achieve change management. So I'll pause for a moment, Justin, just to make sure we're on track and that we don't have any questions.
No, so far so good.
Okay.
If anyone does have questions that is on the line, you can either enter it in the chat or in the Q&A. There's one question about where the slides, where will they be available? I responded to that one already. So if you pull up the Q&A panel, you can see the link there for where the slides will be available in the recording, and we'll do that shortly after the end of this session. But if any other questions do pop up, please feel free to jump in and ask them there.
Thank you. So moving forward with the next slide, the customer service approach. So one thing I've always tried to instill is a high customer service approach. And this goes not only when we're dealing with the public naturally, but it also applies on an internal perspective. So it applies to our internal customers. So we want to strive to improve all the time. And many of you will be familiar with the lean process. We want to continuously improve, streamline our processes, be more effective, be more efficient. And that's an ongoing process. And it applies both externally and internally. So we want to take a look at the time people are standing in line, the time that they're queuing up, or if it's a customer call center, the time that people are on hold. It could be the time to respond to a voicemail or an email, or the duration, the time it takes to process an application or a refund. In one department where I was working, we measured many attributes like this, and it was easy to identify potential issues when the, especially on the call center, when the wait time started stretching out. We would see other issues within that area where there would be longer waits for perhaps applications or refunds, and the need to make adjustments in staffing, or perhaps it's an IT issue. So it's not always just a resource issue. Sometimes it's a process issue that can be addressed to make the everything run more smoothly. And then treat employees fairly, recognize employees, show them respect, and treat everyone the same. Show respect by being punctual and set achievable expectations. If we come in and say we're going to do something that is realistically not possible, everybody in the room is going to know that. So we need to set achievable expectations. One strategy I used to employ was I would have people in my office, we talk about changes on implementing a program, and I would ask, when do you think you could get that completed? When could you finish that? And so I'd have the individual come up with a plan on how they could meet expectations in a given time frame, as opposed to me directing when that should be completed. Then the person who was operating the program owned that date, so it was theirs. And so there was ownership there, more of an incentive to hit the mark on achieving that expectation. And then another issue I think is very important is to cultivate positive relationships. Cultivate relationships with your peers, with the director's office, with agency, with the other control agencies that you work with, because inevitably you're going to need to circle back around and communicate with these people. They're going to need something from you, or you are going to need something from them. So whenever possible, you want to build a bridge for a relationship, and never burn a bridge once it's already been created. So another point to make is that it's unrealistic to expect that you will be an expert in all areas. When I was in a leadership position, I knew a little bit about HR, but I was never really an expert. But there were people I could call on to provide me with information, or I knew resources online I could go to answer some of my questions. So it's always important to realize that you're not an expert. If you don't know the answer to a question, it's okay to say, I really don't know the answer to that, but I'll tell you what, I'll find out and I'll get back to you. That's a perfectly acceptable answer. I remember I used to work at the state treasurer's office, and I heard the state treasurer at one point, he said to somebody, we were briefing him for a meeting on a particular issue, and the person said, I think, in response to the answer. And the treasurer said, it doesn't matter to me if you think, I need you to know. And I need you to go back, find out, and come back and tell me yes or no if this is true. So it's important to realize if you know something, that's fine. If you don't know, it's okay to say that you don't know, but that you will find out. As I said before, it's important to establish those relationships within your own department and externally, and to develop technical experts in several areas. So that could be in IT, in HR, in budgeting, accounting, and so forth. And take advantage of learning opportunities and challenging assignments or responsibilities. I've reinvented myself several times in my career. And now I'm even doing online training, which is a new skill set for me. So, and I like it. So it just goes to show that we can all learn, and we really want to take advantage of those new assignments. And you really want to establish a confidant, seek a close relationship with somebody that you can trust, that you can talk to at your level or higher. So when you're facing a challenge, you're really not sure how to respond, you need more information, you need a different perspective, that you have somebody that you can talk to. So what is your role? So you want to be very clear about what you're responsible for, and again, continuous improvement. How can you make it better? You want to be able to share information as a leader. And that means being a team player. Don't keep all your information at your desk. You want to be free with information to make allow other people to do well. You know, keep that periscope up. Are you just looking behind you, or are you looking forward as well? And be informed. I mentioned rtumble.com. There are many other places you can get information. You want to be informed. You want to anticipate new issues and challenges, and be an expert in your program area. I mentioned the metrics reports earlier. You want to understand what various metrics mean, how the program operates, do field and site visits. And it's acceptable to bring forward challenges. But when you bring forward a challenge, it's important that you also include potential solutions and a recommendation of how to challenge that. The sign of a leader is not just to identify problems, but to also bring forward some solutions and a recommendation. And if you're working at the executive level, nothing should come as a surprise to your executive team. Sure, things happen, but you always want to be able to see them coming on the horizon, coming at you, and raise the flag. Here it comes. Because if you have some bad news, I guarantee that bad news will not get better if you wait. You want to raise your hand as soon as you can and share that information so that the enterprise can begin to address that issue, not just you, but the enterprise. So the strengths of the CEA Academy are to really provide some background in the process of policy development. And that includes budget development, also the process of the development of legislation and how legislation moves through the process, resources to support success, whether that's web links at the Department of Finance or other resources to enable you to be more successful in your career, and also a better understanding of administrative processes like HR and collective bargaining, how to manage IT projects, how to work with control agencies and the administrative process. Also, to help you along with your leadership role, how to introduce accountability and meaningful metrics. We spent a few moments on that already. And really the importance of a customer service approach, whether that's dealing with the public or dealing with internal staff, internal processing like budgeting, accounting, or HR. Now, I'll give you an example of one of the issues we cover in the CEA Academy is what to expect when you have a meeting in the governor's office. You know, what is it like when you walk in and you're led back to a room and you're meeting with, say, some of the governor's cabinet? Or in my case, several times I've met with the governor himself from time to time, and how you should prepare for that meeting. And also, what is the decision making for budget changes or budget change proposals or BCPs, gaining an understanding of that process. In conclusion, what I wanted to share with you is some final thoughts. And, you know, I've been guilty of this myself, and that is that when decisions are made, the policy decisions, it's really not you, it's the issue. We need to understand that there are many moving parts in the decision-making process. And there are many influences. We went over those the first couple of slides in this presentation. We have economic issues, there's COVID-19, there's federal support. There's a myriad of issues that influence decision-making, and we need to understand what those influences are. So when we have a policy proposal or a budget request, we need to understand that decisions are made on the facts. It's not you, it's the issue. And when considering solutions to problems, to challenges, be creative and innovative. I remember once I was working with a department and we were running against a roadblock dealing with the Department of Finance. They'd never approve our resource requests. But then we connected with them in a meeting and tried to brainstorm other things we could do to add resources to the program. This is a program where we had funding cycles every 12 months. We had funding cycles, and it was in statute that we had to provide funding every 12 months. And we weren't going to have the resources to implement this program successfully. So we worked together with the Department of Finance and were able to come up with a solution that everyone bought into. And so instead of every 12 months of a funding cycle, we went to a funding cycle every 18 months. And so that reduced our resource request and then still allowed us to implement that program. Next, if it's confidential, keep it that way. Knowledge is power. So if you know something, just sit on it. Don't share it with others. Only share it with those that really should know about it. So remember, knowledge is power. And also assume all your emails and text messages will be on the front page of the newspaper. So is that something really that you should share? Is that the appropriate thing to say? So in today's environment, we need to be very careful about the sorts of information that we share publicly. And finally, take a deep breath. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And there are times in our careers where we work very hard and we think all we see in front of us is a never-ending challenge. But just like I said before, with the example of registered warrants when we were going through the Great Recession, there were days when it seemed like it would never end, but it did. And we came out of it. We bounced back. We were resilient. And that will happen again now. And, in a year or two, hopefully we can look back and talk about how hard we worked, but now we've moved away from that, and now we're dealing with other things. It's smoothed out. So at this point, I want to thank you for your participation, and if there are any questions, I'm available for questions. And Jason, if
yeah, I got one for you, John. In this historic time, especially to be in a leadership position, how have recent political developments and movements, especially such as Black Lives Matter, impacted your understanding of your position as a leader in California state government?
Well, that's a very good question. I would add, there's several issues right now. It's not just Black Lives Matter. It's COVID-19. It's the economic changes as a result of that. We are probably in a recession or heading into a more deep recession. And so these are very challenging times along with Black Lives Matter. So I think what it calls for is a sense of awareness for you as a person in your own personal relationships, and then to be aware of where your department stands, where your office stands, to try to work with leadership to make sure that things are handled appropriately. So I would just encourage all of us to be patient and to be understanding and make an effort to understand, show some empathy and what's going on right now.
Awesome. Thank you. I don't have any other questions that came in here, but so if you do get them in quick, John did mention our CEA Academy at CPS HR. You can find more information about the CEA Academy on our website, cpshr.us. And if you click on the training link, there's the programs, various programs in there, one of which is the CEA Academy, and it's really 7 courses designed to help prepare and give skills to new CEAs. And so if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out. I wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to present the information today, John, and I think it was really informative and helpful. We appreciate it.
You bet. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
All the slides will be available, like I mentioned, online on our webinar page, cpshr.us. And then if you go to the About section and click on webinars, it would be there, as well as the recording. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next webinar that we have.